I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody.
Red and yellow, brown, black, and white. We're all precious in God's sight. Everybody is somebody. Stop the violence. Save the children. Stop bullying. Save the children.
Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
My name is Maya Bay. I'm the Executive Director of the Arab American Institute. On behalf of the 12 other co-conveners, thank you again for being with us this afternoon. Our panel began by setting the stage for why this is something that impacts us all. If we had a trigger warning for this gathering, this would be my panel now. The reason we are all here, the reason you all have joined us online for this conversation, is to discuss what Palestinians are enduring today.
I want to start by saying that I feel at home here within the four walls of the Rainbow Push Coalition, and allow me to please, thank you. And because I'm home, I want to say that I have never been more proud to be a Palestinian than I am today. Living conditions have always been difficult in Gaza, and the PCRF has been on the ground in Gaza for the last 30 years, way before October 7th. But in the last 100 or so days, Gaza has become a living hell. We have been hearing it through the voices of our staff who are entirely displaced since October 7th, many of whom we have still lost contact with. Tens and thousands of people, mostly women and children, have been killed or injured, and over 1,000 children are either trapped, missing, or presumed dead. A public health disaster is unfolding. Infectious diseases are spreading in overcrowded shelters as human waste and sewage is spilling over. Some 180 Palestinian women a day, 180 women a day are ready to give birth. People are facing the highest levels of food insecurity ever recorded. You hear that famine is around the corner. No, my friends, famine has arrived in Gaza. Thousands of families are even sleeping in the open air as temperatures are beginning to drop. For children in particular, and that is where PCRF is primarily concerned with, because that is what we do. We help children obtain medical care and life-saving surgeries that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. Those are in normal circumstances. But for children in particular, over the last 3 months, it has been nothing short of traumatic. No food, no water, no school, nothing but the terrifying sounds of bombs, of explosions, of falling buildings. That's what children are hearing day in and day out and throughout the night. Children are sustaining complex injuries who need multiple surgeries. They've sustained burns on well over 50% of their bodies. They're being treated without sufficient medical supplies. Maybe 1 or 2 tablets of Tylenol to ease their pain and suffering. Amputations are being performed as a method of first resort because surgeries aren't possible, and they're occurring without sufficient anesthesia. Hospitals don't have fuel to operate any generators that they may still have that are functional in order to power things like ventilator machines that is needed for surgery. We have all seen the images on our television screens of doctors performing surgeries with the light shining from their cell phones. When have we ever seen anything like this? Areas where civilians were told to relocate, as many of our staff have been told, relocate for their safety, are being bombed as soon as they arrive, being bombed to rubble. Hospitals are being targeted. Our cancer department at Rantisi Hospital in Gaza was bombed, a hospital that housed children, the only department of its kind in Gaza that offers chemotherapy treatment and drugs to our children was bombed. They're being attacked and are only partially functioning, these hospitals, many hanging by a thread. They're overwhelmed and lack the necessary supplies that are flooded with people seeking safety. I tell you this because now we all need to question the morality and the legality of striking medical facilities. There is no safe haven in Gaza anymore. Never was. But now more than ever, nothing is safe, nowhere is safe, nobody is safe, not even in a hospital.
Next, I want to go to Hani Almadhoun, who could be here with us today in his capacity with UNRWA USA, but regretfully, Hani has also endured a great deal.
I come to you from Washington, D.C., from our headquarter office for UNRWA USA, and it's a lot, you know. We've been going through a lot as an NGO that supports UNRWA. As you know, UNRWA is the largest humanitarian actor inside Gaza right now, and UNRWA USA supports that work. Because of the generosity of American donors, we've been able to respond a lot. But as you know, nothing is enough. Everybody have failed Gaza because of the situation where, despite this, you know, our colleagues at UNRWA continue to work around the clock. As we speak, there's 5,000 UNRWA staff working in Gaza in the warehouses, in the shelters, in the clinics. And despite of everything, they're not able to respond to the scale of this humanitarian disasters. We're looking at 85% of the people in Gaza are internally displaced, including many family members and friends of mine. And a lot of them are in Rafah. And as you know, UNRWA is working in Gaza, but they've been limited to the south area, the middle area. And frankly, the most heated battles are right now happening in Khan Yunis, so that also limits UNRWA to working in Rafah. From day one, they told UNRWA leave the north. So we estimate there's about 300 to 450,000 folks in Gaza, including pretty much all my family. They're in Mashrou' Beit Lahiya. They have not gotten anything in Gaza. They're really starved and dehydrated. The aid is not getting in there. The Israelis are not allowing UNRWA to operate in those areas, on top of targeting UNRWA vehicles and staff. You may have read this, 146 UNRWA staff have been killed inside Gaza, which is the largest humanitarian casualties in the history of the United Nations. More than 150 installations of UNRWA have been targeted directly or indirectly. And you know, there is serious damages at the schools and facilities. As we speak, there is 1.4 million Palestinian refugees or internally displaced people living in 154 buildings. That's roughly 65% of the population of Gaza, reduced to 154 installations. When I say installations, they're mostly schools, but they could be training centers, like vocational training centers, warehouses, and what have you. And as we move into the winter, things are pretty much complicated because, one, not more aid is getting in. There is aid is coming in now, but not as much or nearly as much as needed. You know, in a good day now, it's you know, sometimes you get 200 trucks, and those numbers are tricky because, you know, if they've shut the water for Gaza, so it's hard to get water. If you only wanted to bring in drinking water inside Gaza, you would need 1,200 trucks a day. So when they tell you 200 trucks, 300 trucks, well, that's good. It's better than 20 where we started. But remember, those aid is not getting into the north, and that's a problem. And to be frank with you, and the south is chaotic, very issues of safety. You know, there is a lot of almost desperate situations where folks are not, you know, waiting the line or have to wait for half an hour to get a bag of flour. There is a lot of tension. And naturally, this is by design. This is a starvation attempt to get the Palestinian folks in Gaza to feel the pain of the military campaign. And there's really nobody safe in Gaza. As you know, there is no more places to go. You're talking about a place that's 10 minutes east to west. Imagine if you get in a car, drive for 10 minutes, that's it. You know, if you bomb somebody in one side, they hear it in the other end. So it is unfortunate. On top of this, UNRWA is facing a lot of misinformation campaigns as the agency works around the clock to deliver aid. We have to answer to rumors often generated by right-wing websites to try to discredit the agency or go after funding for the agency. I'm sure you've heard a lot of that. On top of us being mandated to protect the refugees, we're not able to protect the staff. We're not able to protect the warehouses. In fact, when we talk about folks who died inside UNRWA shelters, there is 313 people that's been documented to be taken safety inside UNRWA facilities that have been killed. And I do not, those numbers include the facilities in north of Gaza because UNRWA does not have staff in the north of Gaza. So it's hard to verify those informations, like at Al-Fakhura school, where there is reported social media accounts show the massacre. Bin Zayed school, where you've seen this footage of unclothed men. That's a lot of numbers there, but sadly nobody's able to go verify those because the north has been shut off. I know from personal accounts, even if you get the most mundane injury in Gaza, you may probably risk death. We've seen a cousin of ours, Abu Wasim, he got shot in his leg and bleeded and passed away 2 weeks after his injury. If hospitals don't have water and electricity, you know how much life-saving services they can provide. We've seen ambulances not able to go around and move patients around. There is a lot of efforts, heroic efforts. At one point, UNRWA issued a statement that said we no longer have a humanitarian operation in Gaza. We cannot call it that because, you know, we call it humanitarian opportunism, which basically when we see a road that's open and we know that we can get to deliver the aid like in areas of Khan Yunis, we take that opportunity, despite the fact that there is really close coordinations with the Israeli authorities. There is, I believe, twice a day, the coordinates of UNRWA's facilities and vehicles and fleet are given to the Israeli authorities, but that doesn't stop that attacks. The most recent one, I believe, in the last day of the year, where UNRWA got a permit to go to the north, deliver some food for Gaza City. And then when the fleet came back, a vehicle sustained some major damage by an Israeli attack. And in fact, I look at the report today, which comes from yesterday, we've seen schools in Deir al-Balah and Khan Yunis where a mother and her daughter get injured by drones. So UNRWA was working, you know, trying to help bring aid. And remember the operation, the humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, it's tricky. There is a lot of wait line, there is a lot of queue. It's not an excuse for people not to act. We ask people to support the humanitarian work and response. It just happened that UNRWA has been really the default, de facto, and humanitarian actor inside Gaza. There's many charities that do things with a smaller footprint, like cooking meals, preparing meals, trying to buy the produce if they can and give it away. Those are very helpful, but we're talking about metric tons of flour, fortified cookies that give people calorie intake. You know, we're bringing in blankets, 500,000 blankets inside Gaza, and that's, you know, that's not enough mattresses. Everybody in Gaza lost everything, and they need everything.
Also with us today, we're honored to have State Representative Abdelnasser Rashid. You've done incredible work representing your constituents, and as a public servant, I want to start by saying thank you for that first. But you've also been keenly aware of the situation more broadly in the West Bank and East Jerusalem as well. If you could share a bit about that with us today.
Let me start by thanking Rainbow Push, thank you, Reverend Jackson and all the hosting organizations for putting on this inspiring and absolutely essential gathering. Thank you for all of your work. My name is Abdelnasser Rashid. I'm a state representative for parts of the southwest side of Chicago and the southwest suburbs, including parts of Little Palestine. I was elected last year, and I'm the only Palestinian American in the Illinois legislature. As Maya said, the focus is rightfully and appropriately on what's happening in Gaza, as we no longer are saying a genocide is unfolding. It's happened, and it's happening now. In October, we were warning of the march toward genocide, and unfortunately, we've seen just such horrific devastation, and it deserves the attention. But I do want to speak for a moment about what's happening in the West Bank and Jerusalem, and then pivot to what we need to be doing moving forward. Israel's taking advantage of what's happening in Gaza to unleash absolutely horrific violence throughout the West Bank. In Jenin, in Tulkarem, in Hebron, in villages throughout the West Bank, you have both settlers invading villages, committing horrors against Palestinians. They disrupted the olive harvest season that was supposed to be going the most important months are October and November. And most Palestinians, I know for sure in the Ramallah area, were not able to harvest most of their olives. And for many families whose subsistence depends on the olive harvest, that was a devastating economic blow to them due to settler violence, due to fear of settler violence. And it's not just the settlers, it's the Israeli military itself and the Israeli police that are also raiding villages and also using airstrikes, which is a newer tactic in the West Bank. Unfortunately, we've been used to horrific airstrikes in Gaza for a very long time. Israel has generally not used them frequently in the West Bank, and we're seeing more airstrikes, more drones going in. In just a few days ago in Jenin, 7 people were killed due to an airstrike in Jenin. And so the West Bank is on fire as well. Not close to the level of devastation that we're seeing in Gaza, as we all know, but it's important to know that for Israel, this is a multi-front effort. They are trying to ethnically cleanse Gaza, but they're also setting the stage for ethnic cleansing in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, which they've been doing slowly for decades. I was in the West Bank over the summer. I was born here in Chicago in Cook County Hospital, but my parents moved me and some of my siblings back to Palestine when I was 5 years old, where I lived for 6 years in my village of Tormosaya. And over the summer, I was eager to go back and reconnect with family and friends and relatives, and went with my wife and our 3 kids. And while we were there, Israeli settlers invaded the village, torched an entire neighborhood, and killed a young man. And there was widespread fear of what could happen to the village because the Israeli military allowed the settlers to come in unchecked. I remember my daughter holding on to me, saying, "Dad, what do we do if we get shot?" The next night, she wouldn't go to sleep, said, "I hear that the settlers can come at night. I'm not going to sleep." And I had to explain to my children what every Palestinian parent has to do, which is to let them know that the Israeli government doesn't care about our safety, that the Israeli government could care less if we are hurt or if we are killed, and so we have to do our part to protect ourselves and to fight for ourselves. This is a conversation that I know many in this country are familiar with. And what I want to say to proponents of Zionism that think that brute force and influencing political power in this country is going to get them what they want. My children are going to be fighting for Palestinian liberation as long as it takes. And not only my 3 kids, but God willing, my son who will be born next month. In February of 2024, I hope that before he reaches adulthood, we have peace and coexistence and security for everyone, for Israelis and for Palestinians. But if we don't, he's going to be fighting for justice here and abroad and for Palestinian freedom.
Thank you so much, Representative Rashid. I believe we have Omar now, who is the Israel-Palestine Director with Human Rights Watch. Omar?
There's so much happening. We really have, we recently yesterday said that 2023 featured the worst year for human rights in Israel-Palestine in the modern history of the region. Unprecedented levels of killings, of atrocities, of repression. So I'll just highlight a few things and look forward, hopefully, to discussing them more in our conversation. The first point to note is before I start with what's happened since October 7th, we have to sort of take a step back and understand what the reality was in Gaza and in the region more broadly on October 6th, on the day before. And the key point to underscore is Gaza is part of the occupied Palestinian territory. It's been under an Israeli occupation since 1967. That's an occupation characterized by systematic human rights abuse, as Human Rights Watch has documented. Israel, even though it withdrew its ground forces and its settler population in 2005. Settlements are war crimes under international humanitarian law. It has retained control over borders, over airspace, over access to territorial waters, movement of people and goods outside of Egypt, control of the population registry, which issues ID cards that you need for movement, control over the infrastructure that Gaza relies upon, natural resources, security. I could go on and on. So despite that shift, Israel retains those obligations. Since 2007, it's imposed a closure policy. These are sweeping restrictions on the movement of people and goods, a generalized ban on travel, nobody in, nobody out, absent narrow humanitarian exemptions, sweeping restrictions, as I noted, on goods coming in or out, which has crippled the economy of Gaza. 80% of the population before October 7th relied on humanitarian aid, the very aid that's now being obstructed from entry. The majority of the population spent about half their day without electricity. So you have a context of 16 years of closure, more than a half century of an abusive occupation. The majority of Gaza's population are themselves refugees who were forced to flee or expelled from their homes inside Israel during the events of 1948, and their descendants, and they've been denied their right under international law to return to their homes. Human Rights Watch has found that Israel's treatment of Palestinians amounts to the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. Again, I don't have the time to go in depth in how we reached that finding, but it's based on an overarching policy between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea that we've documented to maintain the domination by Jewish Israelis over Palestinians vis-a-vis control of land and demographics, combined with the very serious and significant repression against Palestinians and grave abuses committed. And happy to discuss that more in the Q&A. All that is to say, on October 6th, so before the beginning of these hostilities, Palestinians were facing daily structural violence. We're facing war crimes and crimes against humanity on October 6th. So on October 7th, we saw Palestinian armed groups carried out heinous attacks inside Israel proper. It included the deliberate killing of civilians and the taking of more than 200 people, including many civilians, hostage into Gaza. These are war crimes. There is no justification for them. We are also investigating the harrowing allegations of sexual violence that took place on October 7th. Nothing can justify the killings and the hostage taking that we discussed in the other grave abuses. Since October 7th, the Israeli government has largely sealed its crossings into Gaza. They've opened them temporarily the last couple of weeks to allow some goods in. They have cut off electricity and water to the civilian population. That is textbook collective punishment, which is a war crime. They've also obstructed the entry of aid vis-a-vis Egypt and Rafah, limiting what can be allowed in, but also limiting the aid that where it's able to go within Gaza. The obstruction of life-saving aid is a war crime under international law. The Israeli government has, as Human Rights Watch has documented, has also used starvation as a weapon of war. We documented that based on what I just noted about obstructing aid and blocking entry and exit of goods into Gaza and of aid, food, and medicine. In addition, it's been apparently deliberately razing agricultural land that the population relies on for food and for exports, as well as destroying objects necessary for human survival. Bakeries, granaries, water sanitation facilities, etc. And finally, it's based on statements of the Israeli government making clear that it is cutting food, aid, medicine, water, fuel as part of a political strategy, in essence, to secure their objectives in this conflict. In addition, we've seen airstrikes at a scale that's unprecedented. You have about 1,200, when it comes to, I should note, on October 7th, about 1,200, according to the Israeli government, people killed, the majority of civilians. When it comes to Gaza, more than 23,000, the majority of whom are civilians, including thousands of children who have been killed. Israel has used explosive weapons with wide area effects in densely populated areas, even though 83 countries signed a declaration not to use heavy bombs and heavy artillery in densely populated areas. Human Rights Watch has documented the use of white phosphorus, which is unlawful when used in populated areas because it's indiscriminate, causes lifelong suffering and excruciating burns. We have documented unlawful airstrikes by the Israeli government, strikes that have hit hospitals, schools, UN facilities, that have hit centers holding displaced people. Israeli airstrikes have reduced entire neighborhoods to rubble. In addition, the majority of Gaza's population is displaced. 1.9 million people, 85% of the population. Forced displacement is a war crime under international law. I should note Palestinian armed groups have been lobbying rockets towards Israeli communities. These are indiscriminate attacks and war crimes. In addition, much of Gaza's infrastructure and housing has been damaged or destroyed. The majority of homes have been damaged and destroyed according to local authorities, and northern Gaza increasingly seems unlivable for the population. All this is to say, and of course the healthcare system has been decimated, so you see really grave commission of war crimes in Gaza and Israel proper. And then in the West Bank, and I think I heard the last part of the last presentation, but you have settler violence at a rate we haven't seen in years, more than 1,000 people displaced since October 7th, citing settler violence. The rate has almost doubled from what was already a years-long high before October 7th. Entire communities before October 7th displaced. You have more Palestinians who were killed in the West Bank between October 7th and the end of 2023 than in any year since the UN began systematically recording fatalities. There were more Palestinians killed in 2023, more than 2x than in any other year since the UN began recording fatalities. There are more Palestinians being held in administrative detention without trial or charge than in more than 30 years, more than 30,000 Palestinians. I could go on, but I've reached the end of my time, so I want to sort of end by saying why this gathering is so important. We are seeing we're approaching 100 days. We're seeing unprecedented atrocities and killings. They're continuing day in and day out. The situation continues to deteriorate. It is clear the Israeli government will not change course. It is clear that, Hamas and Palestinian armed groups will not release the hostages. These are, ending unlawful attacks, allowing aid and releasing. These are basic obligations of international law. So it's incumbent upon civil society, states and the international community to take action ultimately to protect international law. And that's why I'm so glad that this conversation is happening and look forward to hopefully getting more in discussion about what's happening and what can be done. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Deep gratitude to Vivian, Hani, Omar, and Abdelnasser for the work that you all are doing, and for sharing with us what is clear in terms of what Palestinians are enduring today. Humanity would dictate that we should care, period, full stop. But colleagues, as Americans, folks sometimes ask the question, as if it should ever be asked, but why are we so focused on the pain and suffering from Palestinians and what is happening in this part of the world? And I think one of the most important things for us to understand is that we have agency in this. American policy, our tax dollars, our silence on a ceasefire is enabling the stark reality that our distinguished panel has just laid out for us. So while we should care about suffering everywhere because humanity dictates that we care about each other, we also have to understand the role we have played in 75 years of dispossession, in 67 years of occupation, and in what is happening today.
God is more concerned with justice than praise and sacrificial offerings.
Attention high school seniors and college freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. If you are in need of financial assistance, Push for Excellence offers a variety of scholarships for which you may be eligible to apply, whether it's the Jesse Jackson Fellows Toyota Scholarship, the Cirillo McSween New York Life Scholarship, or the Oralee Sanger Scholarship. Push for Excellence strives to offer something for everyone. Here are just a few of our scholarship recipients.
Hello everyone viewing, my name is Chidi Osakwe.
Dominic Davis.
Julian Jones.
China Mazum.
Miles Chairman.
Jalen Clark.
Marcus Anderson.
Jaden Reed.
Kari Young. It's Megan Chu and I'm a Cirillo McSween Scholar.
I want to take this opportunity to thank Reverend Jesse Jackson for all his support of my college education.
Thank you for all of Toyota for helping with Reverend Jackson with the scholarship as well.
I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Reverend Jesse Jackson for helping to make the scholarship opportunity possible for me.
As appreciative as I was before, I'm even more grateful now having received this scholarship.
Not only has it helped me out financially with paying for tuition, but it has also awarded me the opportunity to learn more about the Rainbow Push Coalition and their different initiatives in the African American community.
I'd like to say thank you to Reverend Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition for all the generosity and support that they've shown me throughout my undergraduate career and for the opportunity to pursue higher education.
For more information, please visit our website at www.pushexcel.org and click on the word scholarships. Thank you and keep hope alive.
When we do this, our best days are in front of us.
Who speaks up for those who don't have a voice?
He has a dream of what
I gotta be loud because so many are suffering in silence.
Life will knock you down.
Reverend Fredrick Douglass Haynes III recognizes the power in using his voice.
But you don't stay down.
To speak on behalf of others.
Get out where the people are in the streets and give a voice to those who don't have a voice.
So using that voice is a must.
I want people to feel heard, served. If it ain't about people, what you here for?
From behind the mic for many years at Radio 1's 94.5 to the last 40 years in the pulpit at Dallas's Friendship West Baptist Church, he doesn't need a script when his message is crystal clear.
If this country is to be true to what it said on paper, then everybody should have both voice, opportunity, possibility, and not be held back by something they have no control over.
In the community, leading protests, speaking at the Capitol and beyond.
Transform tragic murders into transformational movements.
The pastor turned social justice activist doesn't shy away from what some might consider controversial topics.
Oh, y'all invited me, so I'm about to go there.
A Dallas Police Department that has known heartbreaking tragedy to all of our hardworking federal employees.
From an early age, he knew his destiny would always be tied to activism, surrounding himself with the likes of the late Rosa Parks to civil rights leader Al Sharpton.
What put me on this path, on this trajectory?
In his words, leadership is in his DNA, often crediting his late grandfather and dad, both former pastors.
My dad was my hero.
As the inspiration behind who he is today.
I'm real convinced. When my grandfather said, "My name is Fredrick Douglass Haynes," and then named his son Fredrick Douglass Haynes Jr., who named his son Fredrick Douglass Haynes III, it's almost a setup for a date with destiny, where I'm out here trying to fight for justice.
Barack Obama would not be the president, so I salute you, Reverend Jackson.
And that fight for justice over the years caught the attention of international civil rights leader Reverend Jesse Jackson of the Rainbow Push Coalition.
Reverend Jackson is a gift to us. And
April of last year, he called, he said, "You won't listen to me, but I have witnesses now. I need you to succeed me as president of Rainbow Push."
He was asked to become the next leader of the international nonprofit, which at its foundation focuses on civil rights and social activism, and it stems from the mentorship of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I said, "You're serious?"
Shocked by the call, Reverend Haynes went with his first reaction.
But I said, "Can I call you back?"
You said, "Can I call you back?"
Right.
With all these people on the phone?
Right.
Has God ever done something for you you didn't ask for?
In that moment, he realizes the magnitude of what was happening. A civil rights legend who at one point marched and received guidance from Dr. King, after 50 years leading the organization, was passing the torch.
He's showing me that ministry should never just be confined to a sanctuary. And he called me to ask me to succeed him.
And so it was done.
And I am so confident in his leadership.
Not only would Haynes continue as senior pastor at Friendship West Baptist Church, as he has done since 1983.
Congratulations, Reverend Haynes.
He would take the reins as the new leader of an organization he says is arguably just as important now as it was nearly 60 years ago.
One of my favorite Bible passages is, "Now unto God who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above anything I can ask or imagine." And I thought I had a great imagination. I sure didn't imagine that.
A thank you note for Reverend Jesse Jackson. Sincerely, Fredrick D. Haynes.
His faithfulness to his assignment is what he says led to this.
And that's my greatest desire, that God can say, you were faithful to what I called you to do. Yeah.
That I say, congratulations, Mr.
That calling helped him find his voice while using it to help others along the way.
Maybe we need to rehumanize them.
Something he'll need as he prepares for his newest assignment.
I think I said something.
In Dallas.
Reverend Freddie always says something.
In honor of Black History Month, the Rainbow Push Coalition is highlighting African Americans who have shaped their industries and pioneered paths of great diversities. These trailblazers have fought prejudice and injustice, broke through barriers and stereotypes to advance the quality of life, to raise the awareness of the issues, and to provide the leadership for the masses.
In honor of Black History Month, I will be sharing information about Judge Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall was best known as the first African-American Supreme Court justice who contributed to promoting racial equality during the Civil Rights Movement. He argued 32 cases while he was a practicing attorney before the Supreme Court, winning 29 of them. The landmark case, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka of 1954, was considered to be one of his greatest victories as a civil rights lawyer. In 1961, President Kennedy appointed Marshall to the U.S. Court of Appeals. And in 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson made him the first Black Solicitor General. According to Justice Thurgood Marshall, we cannot play ostrich. Democracy just cannot flourish amid fear. Liberty cannot bloom amid hate. Justice cannot take root amid rage. America must get to work. In the chill climate in which we live, we must go against the prevailing wind. Long live the spirit of Judge Thurgood Marshall.
I began doing this work back in the 1970s when I think it was really difficult to have these conversations. We had organizations that were smearing us, that were distorting what we said, were portraying us as supporters of terrorism, and people got fired from their jobs. People were denied positions. People were threatened. First death threat I got was 1970. My office got firebombed in 1980, and it got worse and worse until Oslo, the first Intifada in Oslo, and then the debate opened up. And when it opened up, there was a reasonable discussion that took place in some quarters about Israel-Palestine. And there were ups and downs in the next 30 years, but for the most part, there was an opportunity to speak. The problem is that as the conversation grew, some groups got threatened by the fact that the conversation was changing and that there was more support for Palestinians, and the smearing and the tarnishing of people's reputations and the firing from jobs, etc., started up again. And we're seeing that today in full bloom. I'm hearing things that create an opportunity for an opening of conversation that we have not had in progressive circles. I mean, people have talked about it, people have written about it, but we've brought together 13 national organizations, interfaith,
multiple, diverse ethnic and racial communities, and we're talking about stuff that have not been talked about in our societies before. This is a bold step for PUSH. Tell me about how you react to that.
I react to it by saying this sets the stage for healing. This, as they say in the streets when they're protesting, this is what democracy looks like, the allowance of free speech. It is also a motto, and please let me go here, for perhaps what needs to be done in Christian circles, where in too many instances on the chocolate side of town, Dr. West, black churches and black preachers have been sadly silent while watching the atrocities going on in the Middle East. Number one, because of the fact that the debate has been defined by those who would demonize some while sympathizing with others. And of course, we see that on the news. We see that in terms of how the Palestinians have been defined. We've heard the ugly names that they have been referenced by, but getting specifically down with the church right now. Too many of my colleagues have been silent because they have been baptized in a white evangelical theology that is toxic, that is poisonous, and basically equates what is going on right now with setting the stage for the return of Jesus. That's a dangerous theology. It's a toxic theology. It's a demonic theology. Because I want to say to my beloved colleagues, again, on the chocolate side of town in the black church, who are deviating from the liberative tradition of the black church, the liberation theology of the black church. You're deviating from that, and I simply say, let's go back to your Bible and read the text that says God so loved the world. It does not say God so loved the world except for Palestinians. It says God so loved the world. Let's go back to the biblical text and all of a sudden discover that that Jesus said more about what we do for the poor than what he said about salvation. Let's go back to the biblical text that said, in the Hebrew Bible, for example, God is more concerned with justice than praise and sacrificial offerings. If you don't get that in your theology, then the sad reality is the same white Jesus that has been held for black people in terms of supporting slavery, sanctioning and setting a model for what Jim and Jane Crow segregation ought to look at, like that same white Jesus is now making you hush and quiet in the face of suffering that is going on. And I got to go back to that Jesus, that Palestinian Jew, that dark-skinned Palestinian Jew who said in the judgment, God is going to judge us by how we treat the least of these. And so it says, and don't miss this, God is going to separate the sheep from the goats, the nations, and say, I was hungry, did you feed me? Thirsty, did you give me drink? In prison, did you come see about me? A stranger, did you visit me? Freddie Haynes remix it. I was hungry, but you cut aid, humanitarian aid to children, women, and men in Palestine. I was thirsty, and you contaminated the water. I was in prison because of your prison industrial complex. As a matter of fact, I was in an open air prison in Palestine, and you did not come see about me. And I was trying to exit Gaza during the bombing, but you cut off the border and would not let me go. You can go to hell. And folk gonna say, Jesus, when did we do that? Inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, my sisters and brothers, even those in Palestine where I was born in Bethlehem, homeless, you were doing it also under me, and you can go to hell. And that is the danger, my beloved chocolate black church brothers and sisters who are silent on this, and that is Jesus wants to know where we stand And are we more concerned with being non-prophetic so we get funded in our nonprofit?
What you're talking about, we had a candidate for president just the other day talk about slavery. Or not talk about slavery, actually not mention slavery. She was talking about democracy. And so you had racists who are Democrats saying that they're Democrats. And I always used to argue that, I remember Nixon, the chief of staff, the general who was in charge of the military, said horrible things about Jews, and yet was all for Israel and got off the hook. These were the anti-Semites for Israel. And unfortunately, that's the reality that we're dealing with, is on the right, you have anti-Semites who support Israel and so get a pass. But when progressives raise the moral challenge of what's happening to Palestinians, then they're called anti-Semites. And so ADL focuses on the left, but doesn't focus on the right. And the real threat comes from the right.
And I think it's impossible to be an American today and not to talk about the issue of democracy and the wellness of our democracy. It's perfectly appropriate at this gathering, perfectly appropriate at every gathering. But I want us to just take one step back a little bit. And Jim mentioned this when he talked about the history for my community, for Arab Americans. Jim's told this story, so I'll just mention it. His mom, he said, used to tell him, you could have been anything and you would have been fine, but you had to be an Arab American who also wanted to engage in politics. You had to be an Arab American who wanted to advocate for Palestinian human rights. And I have to tell you, my institution, the Arab American Institute, that was co-founded by Jim Zogby and 4 other amazing people, created this institution and coined a term, the politics of exclusion. We were allowed to be Arab American. We were allowed to potentially celebrate our ethnicity. I say potentially, I gotta qualify it. Things are a little rough right now. But we had to do it in a way that checked our deep connection to the human rights issues of the region. First and foremost, the liberation of Palestine. And because our political participation was shut down, this institution was formed to say, Arab Americans are gonna run for office, they're gonna run for president of the United States, they're gonna serve on school boards, they're gonna do everything they need to do, and they're going to talk about Palestinian human rights. And we made some pretty significant progress. I'm not generally, rays of sunshine, break it all down that way. But we made pretty significant progress, which is why, prior to October 7th, we've been dealing for a very long time. Since 2018, the first time Congress introduced a resolution that said we ought to adopt a definition of anti-Semitism that includes the criticism of the State of Israel. It would come up in Congress, and folks like the ACLU would say, you all do what you need to do politically, but there's this wonderful thing called the First Amendment, and you can't pass it. And they wouldn't pass it, but folks would do their politics. When we talk about the state of our democracy today, let's look at the institutions today. Look at the state of our media. Mark talked about his departure from CNN because of a statement about Palestine. Let's talk about people appearing on networks and boasting that I'm going to shut down the debate taking place on this network because I don't like the way it talks about Palestinian human rights. Let's talk about newspapers telling reporters, this is language we use, this is language we don't use. In America, folks, because it's about Palestinian human rights. Let's talk about Congress. Not particularly great in terms of profiles of courage generally, but I can't remember the last time that a member of Congress called for a ceasefire and had a Democratic White House say that that was repugnant. Let's talk about college campuses, where we've been fighting the conflation of the very real problem of anti-Semitism. See, that's the thing, folks. One of the biggest dangers of all of this is we have a real problem of increase in hate in this country. We saw it with the beginning of the 2016 presidential race. From 2016 on, we do a great deal of work at the Arab American Institute related to hate crime and data monitoring. From 2016 on, there has been an increase in hate crime in this country, and that's official data. I'm not going to give you anecdotal information that includes information about a group of students showed a documentary about the Nakba. That is not anti-Semitism, folks. That's why we cannot cite that data. We can cite official FBI data, which tells us there's been an increase in hate significantly every single year. We have been breaking the record 3 years in a row. We don't want to break a record on hate crime 3 years in a row, but that's what's been happening. So we've seen a very real increase in anti-Black racism, always the #1 category in race. We've seen real increase in anti-Semitism, always the #1 category in religion. I would say more about anti-Arab hate, but folks, the erasure of my community means the data sucks, and I can't really share that. I shouldn't say that from the stage, but there you go. The point is, we have real increase in hate that's happening, and it's not the same thing as brilliant young people on college campus saying, there's an injustice here, I'm gonna speak to it, I'm gonna organize, and I'm gonna work to advocate for Palestinian human rights. Those are not the same things. And part of the real danger when we engage in this process is we move away from the need to actually combat the real hate that exists. And that's a huge, huge problem. So if our democracy is failing us in some very real ways, and we have McCarthyism now, folks. We have the congressional hearings just like we saw before. We have university presidents fired because they couldn't answer a simple question by saying, of course genocide is wrong, calling for genocide is wrong, but no one on my campus is calling for genocide. It's not hard. That didn't happen. So here we are, trying to say that if we are going to advance this conversation and help save our democracy, because I think it was Mark who said, the folks that are shutting down this debate, they are the ones that went after critical race theory. They are the ones that have gone after LGBTQ textbooks. There is a very real desire to say, this country can't look like us in this room. But it does, and it will. And we have to fight like hell to make sure that our elected officials, that our government, that our media outlets, that our universities, that our local city councils cannot shut down this debate because it's too valuable to happen.
We had spent a decade after the first Intifada in Oslo where the debate opened up, and I think that they got frightened that it opened up and they had to shut it down. And what this intense reaction to is the fact of the need to shut it down. We can't let it get shut down. We can't let it get shut down. I was thinking, as we were talking about King, that 1983, the 20th anniversary of the March on Washington, I was invited to be on the National Steering Committee of the March. And 3 Jewish groups said, if you let the Arabs in, we're out. They can't be in. And it was Reverend Jesse Jackson who fought for us, and we stayed in. And we had a role in that march because Reverend Jackson said we would be in. And in we had never been involved in a presidential campaign before. He came to me in 1983, later that year, and he said, I'm running for president. I want you to be a deputy campaign manager with me. And I said, Reverend, I've been organizing my community for the last 4 years to empower them. I can't give that up. He said, we're going to do more for your community in the next 4 months than you've been able to do in the last 4 years. And he was right, because when I saw the reaction of Arab Americans, for the first time having a candidate come to them and ask them for support and ask them to vote and ask them to be a part of it, they got so excited. We actually formed the Institute based on the experience we had in the '84 Jackson campaign. And so I, just a personal note, I owe so much to him and his courage and his inspiration to us all. But the fact that when we were doing this session on opening the debate, on talking about ceasefire, this was the logical place to be, to partner with PUSH, because the legacy of King, the legacy of Reverend Jackson is that we fight like justice, we fight like hell, and we don't let anybody get in the way of the demand for justice and of our right to seek it.
Thank you for tuning in to our International Saturday morning broadcast. We need your support. Here are ways to give to Rainbow Push Coalition. Text PUSH, P-U-S-H, to 41444 to support the work of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and Rainbow Push Coalition.
We're excited to get more people involved in Rainbow Push, supporting the programs of Push for Excellence and the Citizenship Education Fund. If you're interested in impacting public policies, if you believe in the scholarships that we give to thousands of students each and every year, you can become a policymaker by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now. For an annual membership of $35, or if you're a student or senior, $15, you can help us make a difference in the lives of millions. How do you become a member? Visit our website at rainbowpush.org and press join. Or maybe you'd like to support us. You can text the word PUSH, that's P-U-S-H, to 41444 on your cell phone, and you can give any amount you feel comfortable giving. You can also call us at 773-256-2775, or go to rainbowpush.org and push donate. Wherever you are, you can support us as we keep pushing for you.
When I think of Rainbow Push, I think of two words: social justice.
Education advocacy.
Political empowerment.
Freedom and equality.
Corporate partnership.
Stop the violence. Save the children.
Don't get in, shut it down. If we don't get in, shut it down.
Political change.
Inclusion, evolution. Progress, justice.
Jesse Jackson.
Keep hope, alive. Keep hope, alive.
We want to be bridges to end these cultural gaps.
We're going forward. By hope, not backwards, by fear.